Welcome to Comet Farm Tutorials. Today we'll be talking about interpreting reports. In this video, we'll walk you through how to interpret your reports for cropland, animal ag, agroforestry, and forestry. Let's go ahead and start with cropland. When you first look at your report, you'll notice you have the option to look at either your tabular or graphical report. Let's start with your tabular report. At first glance, you'll see that your source categories are listed on the left-hand side of that table, and as you scroll across from left to right, you'll see your baseline and future scenarios listed at the top of that table. If you have more than one scenario, you'll likely have to scroll in order to see all of your scenarios. Under your baseline emissions, you'll be shown the average annual tons of CO2 equivalent per parcel over a 10-year period, assuming the last 10 years of the baseline is continued into the 10 years after the baseline. Under your scenario emissions, you'll be shown your average annual tons of CO2 equivalent per parcel over a 10-year period, assuming the changes in management made in this future scenario. Most notably, the change column demonstrates a change in emissions compared to your baseline scenario. Negative results, shown in green, indicate a reduction in emissions or an increase in carbon sequestered. Positive values, on the other hand, shown in red, represent an increase in emissions or a decrease in carbon sequestered. Under your source categories, you can select the plus button to expand emission source and subsource emission estimates. Expanding the N2O source category also allows you to view details on uncertainty. In Comet Farm, uncertainty is calculated using the Monte Carlo method. Another helpful feature on this page is the button that says Interpret Cropland Report. This will take you to a guide created by our outreach team that describes in detail some of the same information that we've covered in this video. As previously mentioned, we also present our reports in graphical form. These graphs are printable or downloadable, and you can use the drop-down menu to visit estimated emissions by field or parcel. Plus, you can use your cursor to hover over each bar to view the source emission estimates. Lastly, this report allows you to look at your available water holding capacity, which is a measure of the amount of plant available water that can be stored in the soil. Lastly, I'll draw your attention to the option to download cropland export files. This file download will give you a more detailed look at your emission estimates. Now that we have a sense of our cropland report, let's move on to our animal ag report. Similar to cropland, this report is available in tabular and graphical form. Similar to the cropland report, source and subsource emission categories will be available on the left-hand side, and scenarios will populate the x-axis. Each animal category will report estimated emissions separately, such as in this case we only have beef steer stockers. Estimated emissions by herd, which are available for cattle only, will appear below each respective category. This table will also show the total annual tons of CO2e per year both by herd and by animal category for each scenario, shown in black, as well as the change in emissions compared to the baseline, shown in green or red. Again, negative values shown in green represent a decrease in emissions or an increase in sequestration, while positive values shown in red represent an increase in emissions or a reduction in sequestration. For information on how some emissions are calculated, you can click on the calculator icons next to them and find the equations used to determine that value. Again, just like cropland, this report is also available as a graphical report. You can use the drop-down menu to view estimated emissions by animal category. Herd level reporting on graphical reports is currently not available at this time. Again, these graphs can be both printed or downloaded, and you can use your cursor to hover over each bar to view the source emission estimates. I'll once again draw your attention to the Interpret Animal Ag Report button found at the bottom of the page. Similar to cropland, this will bring you to a guide that was created by our outreach team that gives you a step-by-step instructions how to interpret this report. Lastly, just like croplands, you can download the Animal Ag Detailed Report to get an even closer look at those emission estimates. Now that we have a good grasp on our animal ag reports, let's take a look at agroforestry and forestry. The Agroforestry Report is quite different from croplands in that the scenarios actually are found on the y-axis, and you can scroll down to find those, whereas the years in 10-year increments are found going from left to right along the top. If you chose to use a defined scenario in agroforestry, you can double-click on a tree species in order to see those subsource categories of emissions, whereas if you chose to input your own information, those subsource categories will be visible already. The first column shows carbon sequestered in tons of CO2e for the entire stand in a defined scenario in the first year of modeling. And after that, each column shows the cumulative carbon sequestered, again in tons of CO2e, since the initial beginning model period, which is 2023 in this example. The impacts of all the entered trees or practices are shown over 10-year periods for 50 years or until the tree reaches the age of 90 years. Finally, at the far right end, in the last column titled Average Yearly Emissions, you are going to be able to see the average yearly emission reductions in tons of CO2e. A negative value shown here in green indicates a reduction in emissions or an increase in carbon sequestered. Just like the other reports, there is an agroforestry graphical report available where you can choose your scenario from the drop-down menu and your graph will appear. Again, these graphs are printable or downloadable, so you can choose one of those options. And hovering your cursor over the bars will show your source category and the emissions. You may notice that currently we do not have the option to download a detailed report, nor do we have that button that says Interpret your agroforestry report. However, if you go to the Need Help widget and type in the word Interpret, one of your options will be a link to our PDF document that provides a step-by-step guide on how to interpret this report. Now that we have a sense of our agroforestry report, let's move on to our forestry report, which is overall very, very similar. Again, you can see that the scenarios or parcels are listed on the y-axis going down. In this case, they're broken up by total stand carbon and harvested carbon, and double-clicking on those results will allow you to see those subsource categories. And then across the x-axis, we have those years in 10-year increments as well. Similar to agroforestry, all of those emissions are calculated in terms of tons of CO2e, and those are both cumulative and average yearly. There is a graphical report for your stand as well, where you can select your parcel from the drop-down menu and hover over those bars to see the emissions in tons of CO2e. And similar to agroforestry, we at this time do not have a detailed report, and we are working on a interpreting forestry report as well. Thank you so much for watching. As always, you can visit our Need Help widget for solutions to some frequently asked questions, or you can email us at appnrel@colostate.edu. Thank you.